If you've been suffering from calcium kidney stones, there's a chance that a kooky doctor may have told you that calcium was to blame. This could not be further from the truth. If you're interested in learning more about this topic and calcium's role in your kidney stone formation, you're going to want to watch this video. Hi, I'm Joey Weichman, and welcome to Stone Relief. Today's topic of conversation is calcium, and this is an important discussion because calcium kidney stones are the most prevalent kidney stone, bar none, globally. And very, very often, calcium, the root of this stone type, is blamed as the root or the cause of this stone type. And this could not be further from the truth. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and I talk to a lot of people on a weekly basis about their kidney stones, but so many of them are under the impression that calcium is to blame. So today's video is going to dive into calcium's actual link to kidney stones and what impact it has on your kidney stone formation. And you might be surprised what impact it has. But first, let's start with just a little bit of background information before we get kicked off. So first and foremost, as I previously mentioned, calcium stones, most prevalent globally, represent about 80% of the stones worldwide. And breakdown, and again, this is super rough. You find conflicting data everywhere. We just tried to use the best average of all the data that we have, but it's roughly 75% calcium oxalate stones and about 5% calcium phosphate stones. So, now, excess urinary calcium has been identified by almost every major urological association and every research institution around the globe as a risk factor for kidney stones. And I take major issue with this because calcium doesn't have anything to do with it, but it's being put out there into the public and being told to patients as it's root issue, and it is not. So, I'm getting excited. Okay, so measured with 24-hour urine test, and the excess or high calcium is going to be something that is greater than 200 to 250 milligrams per day found in your urine. Now, hypercalciuria, also excess or high levels of calcium, is caused by a number of different things. There could be some genetic disorders that are involved, which is super rare. There's metabolic disorders or diseases, which is way more common. 87% of the Western world is suffering from some sort of a metabolic disorder today, which is absolutely mind-blowing. So this is a big root. There's also a lot of problems with vitamin D supplementation that most people aren't aware of. Additionally, hyperparathyroidism, and the list continues to go on and on. But again, we're going to talk more about this, but eventually you're going to find that really calcium is irrelevant when it comes to the formulation of an actual calcium stone. So we'll dig into that in the next chapter. Okay, so I want to dig a little bit deeper into this calcium being a risk factor thing because I call BS. So, and the reason for that is as follows. Because again, calcium being a risk factor has just like so much information that's out there in the research world and from your doctor. You're only getting half truths. They're only giving you a little bit of the information. They're not giving you the other piece of it. And this is the other piece. So calcium, yes, can be a risk factor, but it is only when one of the two is true. First of which, calcium's a risk factor when the presence of oxalate, because we know those two things like to mingle together and form crystals and form those nasty stones. They are literally like magnetically charged to be attracted to each other. One's positive, one's negative, and locked together like a magnet. So they do bind together. So if you have oxalate in your diet, oxalate in your urine, it's going to bind together. So yes, it can be a risk factor. But again, if you eliminate the oxalate, which is under your control, you won't have any problems. So more calcium is going to equal more opportunity to bind, which again makes sense. The more presence, more opportunity to bind. So yes, I get the risk factor piece of it. But again, no oxalate, no kidney stones. You're missing piece of the recipe. You eliminate this, no stone forms. Next, urine pH is alkaline. And we've talked about this previously with calcium phosphate stones. So calcium favors phosphate when pH is greater than 7.5. Okay. Also, it can still bind with oxalates too, and this is a major source for when we get a lot of these mixed stone types where if you've had a chemical analysis, and some of them can even be done from a visual analysis point, but you'll see calcium oxalate crystals and you'll also see calcium phosphate crystals intermingled because again, it's not a perfect favoring, but it favors it, it likes it more when alkaline, urine is alkaline versus when urine is neutral or acidic, it is going to favor oxalate. But nevertheless, calcium's only a risk factor when these two things are happening. If you don't have alkaline urine and there's no oxalate in your urine, you can have as much calcium floating around in the urine. You could have 500, 1,000. That would signify other issues, but again, it would not be a risk factor for kidney stones. And some of you might be looking at this going, oh, well, okay, I got all this eliminate or limit calcium in my diet and problem solved, right? Because I want to keep eating the same crap I've been eating. That would be the wrong direction, and we're going to talk about that more in the next chapter.
Just a reminder, this information is available in written form on our website. Find the link below in the description.
Okay, so bridging off to this last chapter, we talked about where maybe you're thinking about limiting or eliminating calcium from your diet to be able to prevent kidney stones from forming. And again, this is the wrong direction, and we're going to talk about why here. So when it comes to calcium oxalate kidney stones, calcium actually plays a little bit of like a pseudo-protective type of role. So the way that this works is as urinary oxalate actually increases as calcium intake decreases. And this is some bits from the research. I'm going to explain this a little bit more in detail. So for 1,200 milligrams, this is the RDA, which is we're going to talk about next, of calcium, oxalate excretion in your urine is 2.7 milligrams per 100 milligrams consumed. It's a lot of information to take in, but hold on, we're going to get there. At 600 milligrams of calcium, you are going to excrete 5.4 milligrams per every 100 milligrams of oxalate that's consumed. So what this means is, again, as calcium levels decrease, more oxalate is excreted. So the more calcium you take in, the less oxalate you excrete, which is a good thing. That is a protective impact. And unfortunately, most of the population is woefully shy on their calcium intake, woefully shy. And this is a primary reason for why calcium oxalate kidney stones are at such high prevalence, because most people are wandering around not even getting anywhere close to 1,200 milligrams of calcium in their diet every single day. And again, this is increasing the urinary oxalate that they're excreting, which is creating more instances of kidney stones. So again, the RDA, recommended daily allotment of 1,200 milligrams per day, and this is also backed up by the American Urological Association and a whole host of other urological associations from around the globe. So there's some significance to this. So make sure that you are getting the RDA of calcium every single day. Now, where do you get this from? The best sources are always going to be from bioavailable food sources, and that's species appropriate because there's plant-based calcium, which is absolute garbage, and then there's calcium from animal-based products, which is our body is what it recognizes. So things like dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt, great sources. Bone can also be an excellent source. Broth, there's also powders out there. Heart and Soil makes a bone matrix powder, which is, I think, outstanding. So there are options out there that are bioavailable. Best to avoid synthetics, though, and also plant-derived sources, because these are just not something that our body recognizes. So when it comes to synthetic sources like calcium carbonate, calcium citrate, and calcium chelate, or chelate, however you want to pronounce it, these are things that our body doesn't really recognize. And what I mean by this is this. So when you take something like calcium or any other vitamin or mineral, when they synthesize this in a laboratory, they're only using a very small sliver or percentage of that element that they're trying to synthesize. It's only a piece of the puzzle. It is not all of the rest of the elements that are associated with it and combined with it. And to be honest with you, we really don't have a full appreciation of how all these things interact with each other, but they are missing components. And when it goes into your body goes, kind of looks sort of familiar, looks kind of like calcium, but I don't really know what to do with it. So they might nibble on a few pieces of it and shuffle it over here for this process or that process. But the rest of it kind of ends up as a waste product. And where do waste products go? They end up in your kidney. This is where it binds with oxalate if you're consuming it. And this can be problematic because most of the synthetic calciums out there, and this goes for most synthetic anything, body doesn't recognize it, gets pushed out as a waste product, and it ends up in our urine. So just because our body doesn't recognize it and utilize it for a process or for our bones, whatever it means, doesn't mean that it can't bind with oxalate in our urine or in our kidneys and form kidney stones. Lastly, unfortunately, there's no impact really on calcium phosphate stones. This is really kind of primarily driven towards oxalate stones, but nevertheless, this is significant. So do not cut short calcium. Make sure that you are getting the RDA every single day. Lastly, so if you're getting calcium stones, let's talk a little bit about how you can actually prevent them. And it's not very difficult. You just have to make some choices that may impact your life a little bit, but ultimately they will be a improvement overall. So when it comes to calcium oxalate stones, stop eating oxalate. When you subtract this piece of that recipe, calcium and oxalate, no calcium oxalate kidney stones can form. The only exception to this is primary hyperoxaluria type 1, which is a very, very rare genetic disorder where we actually produce oxalate from within our body. Our liver in particular can create this, and it's, again, so rare, not even really worth covering here. Most of the individuals that are suffering from calcium oxalate stones is because you're eating too much oxalate, and that is just causing the problem. So stop eating oxalate. Oxalate is a plant toxin. Leave it alone. We're not designed to eat it. Now, I'm not saying that this is true for the entire population. There are roughly 80% of the population out there that has zero issue with eating handfuls and handfuls of almond and spinach smoothies and all this stuff. They have no problems with kidney stones. However, as we discussed previously, we are from a different ancestral evolutionary path, and we did not develop the metabolic machinery to be able to process these plant toxins. So it's problematic. So again, lack of the genetic machinery to manage oxalate. This is the byproduct of that. We get kidney stones. Low oxalate diet is oftentimes not enough. So a lot of discussion out there about these low oxalate diets, and the best way I can kind of liken this to is it's like the ketogenic diet, and then you've got all these like cheater type of things out there like keto cookies and keto pizza and keto this, keto that, and like sure, like they might fit the model for keto, but the rest of it is absolute trash and is not good for you. Low oxalate diet, you're still flirting with danger because you're consuming things with oxalate even if you think it's in a low quantity. Problem is, oxalate is cumulative. And what I mean by this is that your intake does not equal your output. Oxalate hangs around in our system for a very long time. We've covered this in a previous video, but oxalate can hang around for several days, for weeks. Our body just does not know what to do about it. It gets thrown in our joints, up in our glands, gets thrown everywhere, and then eventually it will sometimes migrate down and get processed as a waste product through our kidneys and our urine. This is where obviously we have problems with kidney stones, but for the most part, you just keep piling up, and it's released spontaneously, and we really don't have a full understanding of why. They finally may have some crystal depositions with joints or in our glands that just get released, and then obviously they have the opportunity to bind in our urine. So we don't understand that, but we do know that it's cumulative. So just because you're eating a low oxalate diet doesn't mean that you're going to be solving your kidney stone problems. More often than not, a zero oxalate diet, which is appropriate for our ancestral lineage, is the best option. And again, the only exception is primary hyperoxaluria type 1. No need to talk about that anymore because it's so exceptionally rare. Next, calcium phosphate stones. So neutralize your urine pH. Calcium phosphate stones can only form in alkaline urine. So if you raise up urine pH to around 6.5 to 7.5, give or take a couple decimal points, you're in the ballpark of where you need to be. So alkaline urine is anything that's going to be over 7.5-ish on that pH scale. So that is what we need to do. So calcium favors phosphate in that alkaline urine. This is the primary driver for why people, women who are pregnant, have calcium phosphate stones during their pregnancy, because there's a whole bunch of hormone stuff going on that alkalizes their urine and sets them up for this. So in order to control this, alkalizing agents can be used. And what do I mean by this is like pharmaceutical, type of options, synthetic options. Potassium citrate's really popular. There's some thiazide diuretics that are used as well. Got to be careful with those. They are not really meant for long-term use. And as, again, familiar with my channel, we're talking about diet again. Diet's the best. So dietary modifications are the absolute best direction that you can go. In particular, no supplements to buy. That's awesome. You don't have to do this. It's just the food that you eat is powering everything. And the biggest thing, when you change your diet for the better and you make intentional improvements, there are a lot of other things that you may not even really realize that's going on that it could fix in addition to your kidney stones. So diet is always the primary driver for everything that's happening with kidney stones. So when you get this correct, you fix that problem. Visit our website if you'd like to join a community of people learning to manage their kidney stones naturally. See you in the next video.